Legend has it that this is Elvis's favorite horror movie. I have no ability to provide backup, but the legend has it that he saw the film every Christmas for the last 3 years of his life, because of course he passed soon after.
Okay, so you're talking about Elvis Presley, not Elvis Costello.
No. Costello, I don't know his thoughts. Probably not.
I had to do it, right, Elvis.
But Elvis Presley apparently loved the movie, according to some sources, and would make his family watch it every year until his passing. And the family continues on to this day. I still don't know if that's true, but it's a rumor, and I seem to dig it. Yeah. Welcome to the show, guys. Today we're talking about Black Christmas.
It's Black Christmas! Yeah!
Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hey, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals. So tell us some movies we should review in the future. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out the webpage for critics reviews as well as ours. And we're going to talk about a staple of Christmas slasher films. Well, it is the Christmas slasher film of all time, Black Christmas. Yeah, Black Christmas.
It's Christmas time for the ladies of Pi Kappa Sigma, and all through the sorority house, a creature is stirring, and his name is Billy. Claire Harrison is missing, her father and her boyfriend are worried, and a harassing caller is terrifying the rest. The holiday gift today is murder.
Okay, if I remember right, the story, this was developed by Roy Moore.
Yep.
And he wanted the concept, the formula, the baby city and the guy upstairs, the danger upstairs.
Yeah,
right?
that's classic urban legend.
Classic urban legend, baby city and the guy upstairs. But he was also inspired by his true story. It happened on November 17th, 1943, in Westmont, in Canada. A 14-year-old boy named George Webster killed his mother and injured his brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. If you look it up, it's George Webster. If you can, it happened in 1943, and I guess Roy, it stuck with his brain. He always retained that this happened. And it happened right November 17th, right before Thanksgiving. Yeah. So I think that was another inspiration. It's the baby city upstairs, as well as this kind of true event that happened in life that kind of nestled in the kind of the DNA of this movie is part of.
Well, there was a number of horrible serial killer slangs during this time too, where that kind of there was a general fear amongst the public, even if you didn't live near the areas where these things were happening.
Well, this is right when the time where Ted Bundy did his in his sorority house, what Ted Bundy did.
Which I believe actually was responsible for the film getting not released when it was, and had something to do with, I think, a television version of the film not being played on TV.
It was a different title, if I remember the history right.
This movie has a ridiculous number of titles.
Yes.
Which is funny because we all know it as Black Christmas, but the screenplay was originally called Stop Me. At one point when they were releasing the film, the studio was worried it would be confused with a blaxploitation film because it was called Black Christmas. So they released it as Silent Night, Evil Night, not to be confused with Silent Night, Deadly Night, or Silent Night, Bloody Night. Silent Night, Evil Night, where it was released, and the film underperformed, so they changed it back to Black Christmas, and then the movie started making a lot of money. And
it's directed by Bob Clark, who also did another Christmas movie.
Yeah.
He did Christmas Story.
Wait a second. Bob Clark, who did A Christmas Story and Porky's, also did this movie.
Right. I can do Wholesome.
It's the weirdest trilogy I think I've ever heard of.
Right. I've seen this so many times, but I still get a kick out of Margaret Kidder getting the little kid drunk. I know it's not appropriate anymore.
It's so not PC.
It's not PC, but then she goes, I think the kid's snockered. Right.
Yeah. And she's wondering why. Yeah. So Margot Kidder has a lot of that throughout the film, though, too, with the turtle sex thing. Is one of the weirdest,
I don't know where,
ever to give to a friend's parent. I don't know.
Yeah, she gives, but one of the performances as Pops, and made Margaret Kidder kind of, this is her first film, right?
This is first. Well, she did Sisters before, right?
Maybe she did Sisters.
I think Sisters was 73.
Right down if Sisters came out. But I think this is one that kind of put everybody out on the radar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely a big showcase for her, because even though she's not the star, she actually, I believe she was nominated for some of these smaller indie genre awards for being the lead, which is interesting. Yeah. She's not, but
of course, and I want to bring it up before we go. It's a Canadian slasher film, so of course it's in the winter.
Yeah, as you should.
As you should, right.
Jason never did the winter, and he should have. But it's weird to see the amount of current and future genre stars, because you have Olivia Hussey, who had just come off of Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, but she would later do the It miniseries. She would do Psycho 4, playing Norman's mother. We have Margot Kidder, who of course would do Amityville Horror. She did Sisters.
Superman, for God's sake.
Yeah. John Saxon from Tenebrae,
Oh,
Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, we've got all these actors who are, like, icons.
When you get a mystical serial killer, John Saxon's on the case.
Yeah,
as
like he should be. And it's crazy how much he doesn't look like he's aged from this movie to Nightmare.
No, it's as like that famous hair.
He's got the famous dad hair.
Yeah, the famous dad hair. But it's like, you need a detective in a small town where there's a serial killer on the loose and people don't really know it's a serial killer on the loose. You get John Saxon.
Yeah, I think that's the only way to prove you're going to find him, even if you don't.
Now, I'm kind of interested about the mother of the sorority group. This is like her one only movie she ever did. The alcoholic.
I don't recognize her.
Yeah, it's like it's supposed
She's
to be
one of my favorite characters.
If I remember the story, it's supposed to be Shelley Winters was supposed to be it.
Okay.
And then she's like, "No, I'm not doing that." Yeah, every time I see her, it's like Shelley Winters.
Because she kind of does have a Shelley Winters vibe.
Yeah.
But there was a number of like people that were attached to the film that weren't. Gilda Radner almost played Phyllis.
Yeah,
she was one of our almost.
They hired her, right?
Yeah.
They hired her, and they said, "No, I'm doing a TV show."
Yeah, she got a little busy with another TV show,
SNL.
And then of course, John Saxon actually got hired a day before he needed to be on set, because the previous actor, who was an Academy Award winner, Edmund O'Brien, was cast in this role. And of course, when he showed up to set, they realized, he was suffering from Alzheimer's. He couldn't.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about this. Right.
So they had to let him go. But the man won an Academy Award for Barefoot Contessa.
Completely forgot about the story. Right. They took him out to dinner, and he's like, "All right, I'm going to go to my hotel room." They're like, "We're at a restaurant." Yeah. So that was kind of sad because he had Alzheimer's.
Yeah, it's tragic. But if you're going to replace anyone, John Saxon's not a bad way to go. But he found out he had to fly to Canada in like 48 hours to be on set. So,
of course, one of the most famous things about Black Christmas is one of those that use the point of view of the killer with the camera. And then you would kind of use that for Halloween. We'll talk a little bit. We'll get back to Halloween.
Yeah.
But this is one of the few. And then you understand this started from Peeping Tom. This is why we critiqued Peeping Tom first before we did Black Christmas. Because Peeping Tom kind of uses the camera as his weapon too. But this is actually... you're going to evolve one step further, that you're seeing the point of view of the killer throughout the time. So it's not the actually operating camera, but you get to see what he's seeing.
Yeah, I think it was a shoulder cam that the cameraman kind of figured out,
because
they didn't know what to do. They were like, how do we get like a guy moving around looking like it from his point of view? Because Peeping Tom is elegant POV, where like it's not real POV.
No.
It's done in a way where it's supposed to be dreamy and weird. This is like dirty POV, where it's like moving around like this,
like when they do the classic cliche at the beginning of Blowout with John Travolta, they make fun of it. This is the movie they're kind of presenting what they get inspired from, right? Yeah. So if I remember the story right, that how did John Carpenter get involved? He talked to him like, were you thinking about doing another movie? He's like, I want to pick another season of doing this, and maybe I'll do like Halloween, and then
that's the legend. I've never heard for certain one way or the other.
Right. Comment about Bologna, because that's kind of the folklore.
Yeah. I think it's got that same level of like people saying that like Steven Spielberg directed Poltergeist, where I don't put a lot of credence on it, but it's out there and people talk about it a lot.
Yeah. Right, that he was on. There's pictures of him on set for Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But like this film is, I think it's the first ever holiday themed killer. We would later go on to have, of course, Halloween, but we would have things like Prom Night, Happy Birthday to Me.
Death Day,
like all these like ones that centered on a specific date.
April Fool's Day.
Friday the 13th, where they would be on this specific date. And I don't know if that there was one before this.
Yeah.
So,
well, comment down below if you know one.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. Go for it.
So it has that very independent point of view, I think that's the nostalgia for it. It looks very cheap. And I think that's what Halloween kind of did. I kind of have to talk about it the next of Halloween.
Yeah.
But if there was a big blockbuster movie, I don't think it would have that interest or the fanfare.
Yeah. I recall this movie being sold to me and being like very much like, if you love Halloween, if you love Friday the 13th, if you love all these movies, you got to check out Black Christmas. And the first time I watched the movie, I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. It wasn't this like it's a terrible movie kind of a conversation, but I was like, it just didn't work for me whatsoever. Thankfully, I've watched it a couple more times and I've got a very different opinion on the film now. But it's one that it's a very unique and different movie, even though it kind of distillated everything from Psycho and Peeping Tom and basically gave us what we'd eventually get with all these slashers.
Yeah, and it has the right ending for it because you think everything is solved, but you realize we've seen enough horror movies, but this is kind of the start of it.
The only reason I'm infuriated by the ending is this is one that I really felt this movie deserved a franchise behind it. Bob Clark really actually
instead of a remake,
yeah. There had been 2 remakes of this movie, neither of one do a very good job. But Bob Clark tried for decades to get a sequel to this film. In fact, he was still developing one in 2007 when he passed away. A car accident with a drunk driver. When he passed away, he had still had in his head to make Black Christmas 2. He had gotten Olivia Hussey, he'd gotten John Saxon both interested for decades to return to the roles, and just couldn't get it to work. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy, he made two Porky sequels.
I know,
wait,
right.
3 of them, I think, but he couldn't get this to work.
A very famous Margaret Kidder talked about in an interview that the chuckle on set, it was Olivia Hussey was very much into psychic readings, and she thought she was ESP communicating with Paul McCartney and everything, and she got this chuckle that they kind of made fun of it. But that was another reason that Olivia Hussey was on this film. I guess she got a psychic reading, and she said the next movie you're going to make is in Canada.
It's got to be in Canada,
It's got to be in Canada, and then a couple weeks they get a phone call about maybe do you want to do this movie called Black Christmas? So she took it up, right, yeah.
Well, it's interesting that I will always remember her, apart from Romeo and Juliet, for being in films like this and Psycho 4 and It, but she wasn't a big fan of horror. But I most know her for a lot of horror stuff, too. She wanted to do this because she'd never done horror before. I think we probably wouldn't have had her in films like Psycho 4 or It, those kinds of films, if not for this.
Right, she has a very distinct, mature voice, even though she's just a baby in this movie.
That's the irony, too, is that she's, super young, and then her boyfriend in the film is freaking Keir Dullea, who is, 38?
Yeah.
When this movie comes out. I get that you can be a different age going to college, but I feel like your ages should align with the people you're sleeping with. And she seems super young. He seems super
You don't recognize him very much from 2001 because his hair is just...
Yeah. It's kind of like he's like one of those Play-Doh things where they press down and the air shoots out after he's done with 2001. Because, you don't realize it's him, and maybe it's because these 2 movies are so drastically different.
Well, then he has more lines in Black Christmas than he does in 2001.
Yeah.
But, right, and then they have this it has to be point of the time of 1974, this conversation of, I'm going to have an abortion, all that stuff.
Well, and Clark said that wasn't intent. That was just something to get the characters saying stuff between the killings. Yeah. It was never part of a political statement or anything. But I got to give the film props for
that's a hot
broaching
button,
that
especially
hot
74. That is that time right there.
I know people that have said that they love this movie, but they don't like it because they disagree with the arguments. I have or people that don't like this movie that give it props because of the the stance. People who put their political views into this one little subplot, and it defines the entire experience of the movie. And it's such a weird thing to see in the 70s. And to see it so
because they talked about it in Mod, and that was a big deal. That came out years later.
And it's funny that even decades later, we still have a show like Family Guy that got an episode pulled because they had an abortion arc on that show. And it's even today we still have shows getting pulled for conversations about this. Back in '74, Bob Clark was just it's just something for the characters to say.
And then in the 80s, you had to make it like The Fly talked about it.
Yeah.
And a dream sequence. It's not real. It's a dream sequence.
Well, if you had that dream, though.
If you had that dream, yeah. So up next is, of course, what do you think our review is going to be, right? It's our review of Black Christmas. All right. So I think this is a very important film to see if you like horror movies. Because if you like horror movies and you haven't said, I haven't seen this movie yet.
It's a checklist.
It's required, it's required viewing.
Which isn't to call out the quality good or bad either way, but it is,
I'm not
going to
have a disdain with you,
checklist
right.
that has to be seen almost to be considered. Yeah. And if you haven't seen it, you're not a horror fan. Don't worry. But I would check it out because it's on Peacock right now, so you can get it for pretty easy.
But you see all the ingredients. If you like Scream, all the ingredients, which you like all those franchise 80s horror movies. This is kind of like another stepping point. Because we talked about Bay of Blood. We talked about Peeping Tom. Kind of like all those, Psycho. You see the evolutionary step, what they got to the 70s.
Yeah. Yep. I think, I've often told people how much I love Halloween. If you've followed me for any amount of time, you know I love Halloween. I think all the films prior, there's 5 films that definitely have that. They are the godfathers of slashers, whereas Halloween finally got the formula 100%. Everything in that film works for me. But I do, this film, Bay of Blood, Texas Chainsaw, Peeping Tom, and Psycho. these are the 5 movies that, when put together, you can distillate a Halloween, a Friday the 13th.
You know where the trajectory is going.
Yeah, because each one of them does something different with the material, and then all of it combined is when you get kind of what the modern slasher has become.
And I have to say, this is supposed to be a slasher film. The slashing is now so mild, but it had to be so bold back then. It had to be like, wow.
Well, in Roy Moore's script, I've read scenes from Roy Moore's script, and it's a much bloodier script.
Oh.
And it was Bob Clark who said that we can do it a little bit more elegantly, and actually swayed more like away from the idea of heavy on blood. It's got some of the most effective killing scenes, I think, because
effective is the right word. It's the right word. Yeah.
We're gonna get into some spoilers here, but the death of Barb, Margot Kidder's character, you don't see her get stabbed. You don't see her.
No, it's like,
but you see this hand that gets like moves around, gets covered in blood, and then like it's knocking over these like glass crystal figures. Right. I thought that was the most effective death scene in the whole movie, almost, because you're not even seeing her die, but you're seeing like this like tertiary glance at her body stop moving.
Of course, you explain it better than I do, right? Because you're not showing like, oh my God, there's a knife through my heart.
Yeah.
But you see it, and your mind is saying, this is awful.
Yeah. Right. And I don't even like Barb. I mean, like, she's a character I don't like. She's interesting, and I don't want to see her die in a horrible way.
But also has elements of comedy. The prank phone calls kind of get, like, ridiculously, like, junior high kind of, yeah.
Well, the movie pauses for an entire sequence where a cop doesn't understand what fellatio is, which I think is the funniest moment in the whole movie.
Margaret, I love. She spells it out for him.
Yeah, and he's like, "It's the new exchange. It's the thing." I thought that scene was really funny. So
yeah, there is comedy in this.
It's not even so much that the comedy is used to make you forget because that's how it works. You know, you get a lot of good horror, and then you get a comedy bit, something to relax you, so you can get prepped for the next scare. I don't know if that was even intentional, because the comedy bits come out of nowhere, and they go on for what almost you would perceive as too long.
Yes.
But they all work, too. The movie is insanely funny for all of its horrors.
Right. And like I said, it's kind of, you don't think, well, how would Bob Clark do it? Like Porky's or Christmas? Yeah. And we always said there's a thin thread between comedy and horror.
Yep.
And I think after looking at the movie, you see the comedy that he knows how to frame and shoot comedy.
I think he does a better job with horror than with comedy. You know, I think he does. It's not something he did a lot throughout his career after this, but he does a really good job with staging the tense sequences. And I'm not a huge fan of A Christmas Story, so I guess that's
but you also feel sorry for a lot of. I mean, the house mom.
Yeah,
who's an alcoholic and like kind of pathetic.
But she's a loving human being for all of her flaws. We love her. We want to see her survive. And then we do.
And you take all this time. You talk about a toilet in a movie. They take a lot of time with a toilet movie, and you're like, there's got to be booze in there. Ta-da! There's booze in there, right? Yeah.
Clark said that he was very particular. It's ironic that the director of Porky said that he wanted to get elegant and get away from over-sexualizing the female characters, show them as real humans, and not be focused on boobies and nudity. You know, it's interesting that he does that because he does make a wide cast of characters that we genuinely care about. Many of them. We want to see things happen.
Even if Margaret Kidder gets a kid drunk in the movie. Yeah. And she
still does it for love. You know?
I bet he's schnockered. Right. I always get that.
I love the dad, Claire's dad, throughout the whole movie because he's just like a 90-minute expression of
just
concern.
Wound up. Yeah. He's just wound up, right.
I can't tell if he's more concerned for the safety of his daughter or for the safety of everyone else around him.
It's almost like, because that performance, like, you almost feel like you just threw him on a movie set. And like, I hope everybody's safe making this movie, right?
Yeah. It's like if Bob Clark brought his grandfather to set and his grandfather just had this disdain for everything around him the whole time.
But if anybody in film history was so wound up in the butt, I mean, that is tight, right? Yeah.
I'd be concerned, though.
Very concerned. So, have you seen?
Well, before anything else, I want to say my biggest flaw with the movie is something that not a lot of other people have flaws with. So I get that. I really wish we'd gotten a little bit more of Billy. I find the character's voice on the phone a little too annoying. Right. It doesn't work for me.
It'll turn you off eventually when Olivia Huss is sitting there. And
it's not the rudeness, it's not the vulgarness. I don't care about that. But it's just the fact that I'm tired of him.
It's got to be inspiration for New York Ripper. Just annoying on the phone.
Maybe, yeah. And I think there was question of was it related to the weeping killer? Was the guy that would call and apologize for his crimes after he was done? And I think that's possible. What I think he really wins with Billy is that. There are moments, and I had to pause to find them, but there are moments where you see his shadow in the sorority house. in the background. Few and far between, but when they happen, man, it is so creepy. It's like seeing the Ghost and Haunting of Hill House, where it's like I wasn't supposed to see something, and now
It's
I
like
do.
in the window.
Yeah, and every time you see that shadow, you're like, oh my god, that's something terrifying.
But
So I think that's where you
yeah,
wins,
I agree.
You know?
You have to maybe want to see just a shot.
Yeah.
We move the baby alive. You see a second.
Yeah, I don't even need to see his face, but I want to see a body. Like I want to see his body maneuvering around a little bit more. You know, it's like the most terrifying thing about Jason Voorhees isn't the stabby. It's the fact that when you have a shot where it moves by and like you see like him in the background, you're like, oh my god! Like it's that moment of you realize he's there before the characters do. That's my only big issue with the movie, though. I actually over 4 viewings of it, I've liked it more and more every time. So.
Right, but you maybe want to do like The Exorcist 3 when the lady's walking down the hallway and then he follows.
The best jump scare ever.
That was the best one. Yeah, if you do it that way, just have it follow.
That's true. Yeah,
something like that. So.
Yeah. So again, have you seen Black Christmas?
Oh yeah, many times.
And let me ask you this: I know a lot of people are going to say 1974, but do you prefer one of the other ones? I know one other guy that loves the 06 one more than 74, but I don't know anyone else.
it was so just like yeah.
It's immemorable. It's both of them. But
Right.
let us know if you're on the other side of things, and if you absolutely adore one of the remakes more than the original. We'd love to have the conversation with you. Let us know down in the comments section below, and make sure that you like and subscribe when you
Please do.
We've got a couple more weeks of horror movies for you before we end out the year. Please join us for that. And you can check out the Patreon down below, and you can find all of my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
You can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts.
Happy holidays. We'll be back for more horror. Don't worry.